A returning generation ship could reach Earth after centuries away, only for its crew to discover that they still cannot step outside. The crew may be able to see clouds, oceans and coastlines through the windows, while doctors on Earth tell them they cannot leave the ship yet. Before anyone steps outside, both sides would need to understand what the voyage has changed, from the microbes carried aboard to the effects of generations spent living in a very different environment. That would probably mean quarantine, testing, and a period of carefully controlled contact. But the biological questions may only be the beginning. A population that has lived apart from Earth for generations would not return unchanged. Their language may have shifted, their accents may sound different, and everyday words could have developed around technologies and experiences that people on Earth never shared. They may still understand one another perfectly well, yet jokes, manners, and even simple pauses in conversation could carry different meanings after centuries of separation. Their bodies could have changed as well. Different gravity, radiation exposure, closed habitats and generations of medicine could leave the returning population better adapted to life aboard the ship than to life on Earth. They might be healthy in the environment where they were born, yet need months or years of rehabilitation before they could safely live under Earth's gravity and conditions. And then comes the harder question of where they actually belong. The people returning may know Earth through old recordings, family stories and maps passed down across generations, but none of them may ever have stood beneath its sky. Earth could still regard them as descendants of the people who left, while the travelers themselves may feel more at home inside the ship that carried their families for centuries. So returning to Earth would not simply reconnect two groups of humans separated by distance. It could bring together two populations that share the same ancestry but have spent generations developing apart, and force both sides to decide how much they still have in common. By the end of this video, you will understand what might happen when a generation ship finally returns to Earth, why quarantine could be only the first obstacle, and whether coming back to humanity's home would still feel like coming home at all. If you enjoy exploring questions like this with me, subscribing helps others find them too. Liking and sharing the video helps even more. Now, let's begin. Earth can keep the hatch closed, but it can't stop the message from arriving first. Long before a returning ship reaches the solar system, its crew could send home records of the voyage. Their reports and medical findings would move at light speed, while the people who made them remained years away. Earth might learn almost everything the travelers chose to share before seeing a single face. That delay seems to offer a simple answer. If the information is already here, perhaps the people don't need to return. They could remain in their new home while Earth receives their discoveries without facing the risks that may come with their arrival. But a person is more than an archive with a pulse. A recording can explain what someone believed when it was made. It can't sit through a hearing, hear the judgment change and respond. It can't meet a descendant who has known them only as a distant voice, or stand before the public as living proof that a separated community still claims a place in humanity's shared story. Watching its author enter the room later is different from receiving a signed letter. The letter may contain every fact you wanted, but the arrival changes the exchange. Someone has crossed the distance, accepted Earth's power to decide what happens next, and asked to be recognized in person. A message can preserve testimony, but it can't live under the result. The returning person can be welcomed, confined, challenged, or refused, and must remain present for Earth's decision. Return therefore becomes a constitutional act, even if no written constitution planned for it. Some travelers may have been born far from Earth. Their laws and customs may differ after generations apart, and their bodies may have changed as well. Their arrival forces Earth to decide whether belonging rests on birthplace or ancestry, shared biology or loyalty, or simply the choice to come back. That decision reaches beyond the people at the hatch. Keeping it closed could be defended as caution, yet still feel like rejection. The ship's community would see Earth's answer. Years later, distant settlements might receive the news and learn whether shared history still carries a claim when people no longer share a world. So the ship isn't bringing mail that happens to need a landing place. It carries people making a claim no transmission can make for them. We came from you, we changed, and we returned to learn whether there is still a place for us here. The information may arrive first. Recognition cannot. Before Earth answers that claim, it has to decide what exactly has come home. A return like this would be treated less like a delivery and more like a pilgrimage. The travellers would not arrive simply because moving people was the fastest way to move knowledge. They would arrive because crossing the distance in person gives the act a weight that no archive, signal, or remote conversation can carry. We already understand this on Earth. People travel to ancestral homes, memorials, sacred places, and old battlefields even when photographs are easy to find. The trip costs time and money. It can be tiring, awkward, and disappointing. Yet standing there changes the meaning because the body has completed the route. You are no longer learning about a connection, you have acted on it. For the returning ship, that action would belong to everyone who lived along the route, including generations who knew they would die before arrival. Their descendants would carry names, records, ceremonies, and promises made by people who had never seen Earth. By the time the ship reached the solar system, the journey might be woven into its government. Maintaining the mission could be part of the founding law, with each generation required to preserve the chance of return for the next, long after its first authors were gone. That makes arrival a constitutional act. The travellers are fulfilling an agreement with the dead while asking the living to recognize it. Earth would also face a public decision larger than where to place the ship. A government that welcomed the return would be saying that human membership can survive distance, biological change, and centuries without direct rule. A government that refused would be drawing a different line around its political community. And everyone would watch closely. Settlements elsewhere could judge their own future by Earth's response. If separation eventually cancels belonging, then leaving Earth means accepting that your descendants may become foreigners to the place their culture still calls home. If belonging survives, Earth becomes more than a birthplace. It becomes the shared civic center of people who may no longer share a world. That sounds grand until someone has to write the protocol, choose who speaks at the first meeting, and decide which flag, if any, belongs in the room. Symbols become practical very quickly when several populations claim them. So the return would not be justified by what the travellers could deliver. Its meaning would lie in the voyage itself, and in the public recognition they had crossed so far to seek. But if Earth accepts that meaning, who has the right to speak for Earth when the door finally opens? Earth would need more than a welcoming committee. The people stepping out of that ship might share no current citizenship with anyone waiting for them, and no government could simply claim the meeting as its own. The vessel would have crossed the distance as a moving community, carrying families, laws, memories, disputes, and ways of living changed by the voyage. By the time it arrived, it would be less like a sealed envelope and more like an embassy whose country existed between worlds. That changes what return means. You can receive a message, copy it, and store it without giving the sender any place in public life. A returning population asks for recognition. Its members need to know whether Earth sees them as visitors, descendants, citizens, or representatives of another branch of humanity. Each answer brings different rights, and the choice could shape every meeting afterward. The ship would carry public meaning of its own. Its corridors may hold names passed down for generations. Its records may preserve songs, family histories, court decisions, and accounts of choices made far beyond Earth's reach. These aren't merely cargo. They show that a human society endured long enough to come back and stand before the world where its story began. Opening the hatch would therefore be a constitutional act as much as a physical one. Someone would have to authorize entry, define the traveler's legal standing, and decide whether agreements made aboard the ship deserve recognition on Earth. If the vessel has an elected council, does Earth treat that council as a government? If the travelers claim rights through their ancestors, which rights survived the distance and under whose law? Then comes the public ceremony, awkward and unavoidable. We would watch the first handshake and notice who stood closest to the hatch. A national leader might seem too narrow, Yet a huge international delegation could turn the arrival into a conference before anyone had even found a chair. The travelers might follow their own rules about who can speak, while Earth waits for a single captain who never existed. The ship cannot be treated as a delivery service. Its return says that separation did not erase relationship, and that people born elsewhere can still ask to be received as part of a shared human history. Accepting that claim would bind Earth to more than hospitality. It would force the people here to decide what kind of political community humanity has become. That decision would reach far beyond the people gathered nearby. And before any law could carry that weight, Earth would face a smaller, sharper problem at the open hatch. What could the first person waiting there truthfully promise? The first promise would probably sound less like a welcome and more like an instruction. Keep the hatch closed. No one on Earth could safely authorize a handshake, a breath of shared air, or even the unloading of a suitcase until both sides understood what might travel with it. Waiting would feel cold, but opening too soon could turn a warm gesture into a mistake no one could take back. We already use this logic when spacecraft return samples from another world. The container stays sealed because a speck of dust could carry chemistry, or perhaps biology, that no laboratory has seen before. With human travelers, the problem grows in both directions. Their bodies, food systems, waste tanks, crops, and microbes would contain descendants of life that left Earth generations ago. Earth would meet them as relatives, but biology doesn't care about the family resemblance. A closed ship also creates its own uncertainty. Think of a jar garden kept sealed for years. Even if every plant and insect began on Earth, the community inside changes as some species thrive, others fade, and countless microbes trade genes. Now replace the jar with a vessel carrying people through many generations. Its ecology would have been shaped by recycled air, limited soil, medical treatments, radiation, and constant human repair. Much of it might be harmless. Some of it might be so fragile that exposure to Earth's microbes would threaten the travelers before they threatened anyone here. That is why containment would come first. It wouldn't be punishment, or proof that the returning people were somehow less human. Neither population could know what contact would do. The safest arrival might involve separate air systems, remote medical exams, sealed sample transfers, and conversation through glass while laboratories compare both microbial worlds. Even sharing a room could wait until each side understood what the other had been breathing. Yet that cautious plan creates a problem of authority. Someone must decide how long containment lasts, what evidence is enough, and whether a traveler may refuse a test. Public health officials could manage infection risk, but a ship is also a home, and perhaps a political community. Earth could not simply seize its records, open its stores, or treat every passenger as biological cargo. Consent would still apply, even with billions of lives outside the hatch. So the first welcome would carry a strict limit. You may enter our conversation before you enter our air. That could protect both sides, while giving them time to build rules together. But if the travelers rejected Earth's quarantine, who would have the right to keep the hatch closed? Keeping the hatch closed would be the safest first choice, because the ship would bring more than its passengers. Every person would arrive with a private crowd of bacteria, fungi, and viruses living on the skin, in the mouth, and deep inside the gut. Most of those tiny passengers might be harmless, even necessary for health. A few could behave very differently after generations apart from Earth. That creates three paths for biology to cross the boundary. The first is direct. A passenger carries an infection that can spread between people. The second is less obvious. Their microbiome, the living community carried by every human body, could contain organisms Earth has never tested against its people, crops, or animals. Something harmless aboard the ship might find a new host here, much as a houseplant pest can become a serious problem after reaching a place with no defense against it. Then there is everything else the ship carries: food cultures, seed banks, soil organisms, medical samples, waste systems, perhaps animals or engineered microbes used to keep the air and water clean. A generation ship would depend on this shared ecology. You couldn't treat it as a pile of luggage and run a cloth over the boxes. Removing one organism, might damage the system that keeps the travelers alive, while releasing that same organism on Earth might carry a risk no laboratory could quickly measure. The danger would also run both ways. Earth's microbes could reach people whose immune systems had developed inside a sealed population. Even familiar illnesses might strike them in unfamiliar ways. Their crops and life support organisms could be vulnerable too, so opening the hatch without care might threaten the very ecology that brought them home. This is why containment would come before diagnosis. Earth would probably begin with sealed docking, separate air handling, remote interviews, and repeated sampling of people and supplies. But tests only find what they're built to find. A negative result can rule out a known virus. It cannot prove that every unknown organism is safe, or that a whole ecological system will remain stable after contact. No single clean bill of health could settle that. Entry might have to happen in layers, with information crossing first, then sterilized objects, then carefully monitored biological samples. Passengers could face the longest wait, even though they were the ones everyone had been waiting to meet. And time would not remove the hardest uncertainty. Containment can reduce exposure, but a closed ecology is full of relationships no one may fully understand. So who decides when the evidence is strong enough to move from a sealed welcome to shared air? The first welcome might happen through a sheet of glass. On one side, the returned passengers would see doctors, officials, and perhaps family members in protective clothing. On the other, people on Earth would see living human beings who had crossed an impossible distance, yet still could not be allowed to open a door. That would feel cruel after a celebration seen across the planet. But containment would probably become the first shared instinct, because the risk runs both ways. Earth would need protection from unfamiliar biology, while the travelers would need protection from microbes their immune systems had never met. If you stood in that room, even a handshake would carry more uncertainty than the voyage home. Hospitals already use isolation rooms when doctors don't know what an infection can do. Air pressure, filters, sealed waste systems, and protective clothing buy time to study the danger before more people are exposed. A returning spacecraft would need the same basic logic on a much larger scale, with one added problem. The passengers might depend on their own closed ecology. Their microbes would live on their skin and inside their bodies, but also in the soil that grew their food and throughout the air and water systems that kept them alive. Separating one person from that system might be less like moving a patient into another room and more like taking one piece out of a working aquarium. The person might appear healthy while the wider system begins to fail. So we probably wouldn't give entry authority to one office. Medical teams could judge human health, ecologists could study the ship's living system, and public agencies could control access to Earth. None could guarantee safety alone. A doctor might approve the passengers while an ecologist still opposed opening the habitat. One government might accept a small risk that another refused, especially if the landing site sat near a border or a major city. The glass wall could then become political. The passengers might be citizens of one nation, descendants of several, or members of a community that no longer accepted any Earth government as its rightful authority. They could agree to medical tests without accepting confinement with no clear end. Earth, meanwhile, could argue that no person has the right to expose billions of others to an unknown ecological risk. The welcome would still be real. People could speak, exchange records, and recognize one another. But affection cannot measure a biological hazard, and legal status cannot make one disappear, so the door would remain closed. At some point, someone would have to sign the order allowing the first direct contact. What authority could make that decision for both Earth and the people behind the glass? The first conversation might seem easy enough. Both sides would have recordings of English, dictionaries, grammar books, and thousands of hours of people speaking. Yet those records would preserve the language that left Earth centuries earlier. They wouldn't freeze the way people used it afterward. You can hear a small version of this within one lifetime. Families invent nicknames that make no sense outside the house. Workers shorten long instructions because they say them every day. Children copy a phrase, bend it slightly, and pass the changed version along. Place those habits inside a closed ship with no fresh speakers arriving, and every new generation learns from people who learned from the same isolated group. The ship might still teach an official form of English in school. Its laws, medical files, and flight manuals could preserve older meanings with great precision. Daily speech would have less reason to stay fixed. A repair crew might compress a whole safety procedure into 2 words. Families living near the farms could borrow terms from crop failures, water limits, or the weekly food count. A word that once described a machine could become an insult, a warning, or something tender. The differences might also run through the ship itself. Engineers, growers, doctors, and families could each develop their own shorthand, understood across one corridor but not another. A passenger moving between decks might already need to adjust how they spoke. None of this requires anyone to invent a dramatic new language. Speech changes whenever groups spend enough time apart. Over several centuries, the difference could grow from a curious accent into changed sounds, new grammar, and familiar words carrying unfamiliar meanings. Earth would have changed as well, which means neither side would own the untouched original. Translation remains possible. Linguists could compare old recordings with current speech, while software tested likely meanings against actions and replies. Technical documents might provide the strongest bridge because a valve, an orbit, or a dose has measurable effects. Household talk would be harder. Jokes depend on shared embarrassment. Warnings may hide inside polite phrases. A child's pet name for a grandparent won't appear in an engineering archive. That gap could have real consequences behind the glass. A doctor might hear agreement where the speaker meant reluctant obedience. A ship officer could use a routine phrase that sounds threatening on Earth. Even after both sides learned each other's words, they would still need time to learn what those words do between people. And if a simple reply can carry centuries of hidden meaning, how would either side know when it had truly understood consent? A language can stay fixed in a ship's records and still sound foreign at the dinner table. The archive would preserve the words used for laws and repair manuals, along with messages meant to last for centuries. People would guard that language because a small change could alter a legal duty or make an old instruction unsafe. But nobody talks to family as if they're reading a maintenance order. At home, speech bends. Words get shortened or misheard. Then children inherit the changed versions. A phrase from the first crew might become what a parent says when a child is taking too long, even though it once warned that an airlock check was late. Different parts of the ship could name the same meal in different ways because their farms produce different food. After a few hundred years, the official language might be heard mainly in records and formal events. Work would shape another voice. If you've heard 2 mechanics talk across a noisy room, you know how much they can fit into half a phrase and 1 pointed finger. On a closed ship, the same systems would be repaired across many generations, so the shorthand could grow very dense. A crew member might have 1 word for a certain sound inside a pump. Earth may have no matching word, because no machine here has spent centuries failing in quite the same way. We have seen smaller versions of this split. Latin remained in European law and worship long after people at home had begun speaking forms that became French or Spanish. The formal words endured while daily speech moved on. A generation ship would allow even more time for that change, inside walls that few new speakers ever crossed. The ship's first transmissions could therefore be easier to read than its people are to understand. An arrival statement might use language preserved from launch, perhaps close enough to Old Earth English for historians to follow. Then someone turns away from the microphone and speaks in a voice shaped by family life, shift work, and the constant sound of the ship. The archive alone wouldn't be enough to translate that voice. Linguists would need to hear people at work and at home. They would have to learn how a phrase changes when spoken by a supervisor, a frightened patient, or someone trying to show affection. Some meanings may never line up exactly. The Descendants would face the same trouble with us, since Earth's speech would have kept changing too. Both sides could trade words with growing confidence. Living together would demand something harder, knowing whether authority belonged to the ceremonial voice, the shorthand used beside a failing machine, or the speech people trusted at the kitchen table. What would happen when those voices gave different answers? The first misunderstanding might happen over something as simple as a repair order. An Earth engineer asks for a valve to be closed, the Descendants confirm the request, and everyone believes the exchange worked. Then the wrong valve closes, no one lied, and the equipment translated every word. The trouble was that the same command meant different things inside two working cultures. A ship built to cross centuries would need stable speech for manuals, law, navigation, and emergency drills. That official language might change slowly because a loose meaning in a reactor procedure could kill people. Children could learn it in school, much as we learn formal grammar, then hear a different kind of speech in the corridor outside. At home, words would bend faster, families would shorten names, borrow terms from machines, turn old mistakes into jokes, and invent expressions that made perfect sense only if you knew the story behind them. Technical crews would add another layer. A phrase used by engineers might sound alarming to everyone else while describing a routine condition. We already do this. A doctor can say that a result is negative and mean good news. A computer technician can kill a process without harming anyone, put several centuries between the speakers, add machinery that no longer exists on Earth, and even a correct dictionary begins to wobble. The Descendants may also preserve an Earth language that people here no longer speak in quite the same way. Its words could sound familiar while carrying older meanings, rather like opening a family letter and finding a sentence that you can read but not fully feel. Pronunciation would drift. Grammar would simplify in one place and grow new rules in another. New objects would need names, while words for abandoned places, animals, or customs might survive only in songs and ceremonies. So the first translators couldn't rely on matching one word to another. They would need to watch what people did after speaking. If someone used a certain phrase before opening an airlock, the action would help define it. If the same phrase appeared during an argument at dinner, its meaning might be social rather than technical. Gesture, timing, status, and tone would carry part of every message. That work could take months, even with patient speakers and powerful software. Early errors would be awkward, sometimes funny, and occasionally dangerous. Earth might hear disrespect where the Descendants intended formality. The Descendants might mistake a warm invitation for an order because it came from an official. That is where first contact would become daily work. Words would arrive first, but comprehension would lag behind. And once both sides could understand the command, they would still have to decide whose command to obey. We already know what happens when a healthy adult comes home after months without Earth's full pull. The landing is over, the hatch opens, and people who could float through a spacecraft with practiced ease may need help standing, walking, or simply keeping their balance. That isn't because they forgot how to use their legs. On Earth, your bones, muscles, heart, blood vessels, and inner ear spend every day working against gravity. Remove much of that load, and the whole body adjusts. Muscles lose strength because they aren't asked to hold up the same weight. Bones shed some of the material that once kept them strong. The heart no longer has to push blood upward with quite the same effort. Then the astronaut returns, and all those systems have to carry a full Earth body again. NASA crews train for that return, and medical teams are waiting when the capsule lands. Even so, some astronauts feel faint when they stand, because blood pools lower in the body. Balance can be unreliable while the brain tries to make sense of signals from the inner ear. Walking may feel less like coming home, and more like borrowing someone else's legs. Recovery varies. Some abilities come back quickly, while strength and bone health can take much longer. Exercise in orbit helps, especially resistance training that gives muscles and bones something to work against. It reduces the damage, but it doesn't make months in weak gravity equal to months on Earth. That evidence gives us a firm limit. Gravity reaches through the body as a connected system, so arriving on Earth would be more than a difficult workout for someone accustomed to a lighter environment. Breathing, circulation, posture, balance, and movement would all be trying to adapt at once. But today's astronauts began life under Earth gravity. Their skeletons grew here, their hearts and brains learned their jobs here. Spaceflight changes bodies that already carry an Earth-built starting point, and rehabilitation helps them return towards something they knew before. A child born aboard a ship would give us a different case. If that ship produced only part of Earth's gravity, the child's bones, circulation, balance, and movement would develop under that smaller pull from the beginning. We have no adult humans who grew up that way, so astronaut records can't tell us whether later training would fully prepare them for Earth, or whether some early changes would be difficult to reverse. Before anyone argued over laws, work, or citizenship, their body might face a simpler demand: remain conscious, upright, and able to move. So what kind of gravity would a ship need to give its children a fair chance of standing on Earth? Astronauts returning from orbit can look surprisingly unsteady for people who have just crossed space. Their legs feel heavy, their balance can falter, and standing without help may take real effort. The body has spent months adjusting to near weightlessness. Then, within minutes, Earth asks it to carry its full weight again. We know this because crews have been measured before and after flight. NASA doctors have recorded bone loss, weaker muscles, changes in blood flow, and trouble with balance after astronauts return from the International Space Station. Some become lightheaded when they stand because their circulation no longer responds to gravity as quickly as it did before launch. Others need time before they can trust their legs again. These effects are real, but the people experiencing them all share one advantage. They grew up on Earth. Their bones formed under Earth's gravity. Their hearts learned to push blood against it, and the organs of the inner ear learned what upright meant during childhood. Spaceflight changes those adult systems, sometimes severely, but it changes systems that were built here first. Astronaut recovery is a reloading problem. You can take weight off a spring, leave it unloaded for months, and then ask it to bear weight again. Watching the spring respond can teach you a great deal about unloading and recovery. It cannot show you what happens when the spring itself is made under a lighter load from its first day. A child raised aboard a rotating ship would develop, while the ship's gravity shaped every step, fall, growth spurt, and night's sleep. If that pull were weaker than Earth's, the child might build less bone, different muscle strength, or a circulation system tuned to a smaller demand. Even the brain's sense of balance would be learning from a world where down did not pull as firmly. Exercise might help. Strong and steady artificial gravity might be enough. But we don't know the minimum, because no human childhood has taken place away from Earth. Animal studies can test pieces of development, and adult astronauts can show which changes may recover. Neither gives us the missing life history. Childhood isn't just a longer space mission. It is when the body builds many of the systems that a returning astronaut is trying to restore, including its lasting responses to weight, motion, and standing upright. That difference leaves doctors without a human comparison they can safely extend across an entire childhood. The first people born between worlds may reach Earth with passports, relatives, and a language waiting for them, yet still face a physical test no returning crew has ever taken. Before anyone decided how they could live here, doctors would need a more basic answer. Could a body built under ship gravity ever become fully comfortable under ours? For an adult astronaut, coming home can begin with a chair. After months in orbit, standing may bring dizziness and weak legs. The floor can seem to ask far more of the body than it should. The spacecraft has landed, the hatch is open, and gravity has already started assigning homework. NASA crews returning from the International Space Station are helped from their capsules because safe walking can't be taken for granted. In weightlessness, the muscles that hold you upright have less work to do, and bones lose some mineral. The heart also gets used to moving blood without fighting Earth's pull. Meanwhile, the inner ear adapts to months without the familiar signal that tells you which way is down. Once home, these systems must work together again. When an astronaut stands, blood may settle toward the legs, so less reaches the brain. That can cause lightheadedness or even fainting. Walking may also feel unstable while the eyes and inner ear learn how to agree again. A careful step can demand attention it never needed before launch. That's why rehabilitation often begins within hours of landing. Medical teams help astronauts rebuild strength, then work on balance and endurance as the body allows. At first, even getting up or crossing a room may take planning and support. Recovery varies from person to person, and one system may improve before another. Many effects ease within days or months. Some last longer, and researchers are still studying how repeated or very long missions may change recovery. Arrival, then, doesn't end when the capsule touches the ground. It may continue on a treadmill or between parallel bars as someone learns again how to carry their own weight. There is something mildly unfair about crossing space only to be defeated by standing up. Yet that struggle shows how fully your body adjusts to the gravity around it. Home can be under your feet while your body is still catching up. Adult astronauts give us both a warning and a limit. Their experience shows that a body formed on Earth can struggle after time away from its gravity. It does not tell us what would happen to someone who grew from infancy beneath the weaker pull of a ship. Returning crews are restoring abilities they first learned here. A ship-borne person might have to develop those abilities for the first time, under conditions no astronaut study has tested. Rehabilitation might help, but we don't know how much. It could take far longer or leave lasting limits, and Earth might never become comfortable at all. No human evidence can choose among those outcomes. Adult missions can show us recovery after weightlessness, but they can't stand in for a childhood spent under different gravity. If reaching the ground doesn't mean someone can safely remain there, what would arrival actually grant them? A ship can hide its passengers from radiation, but every layer of protection has mass, and mass costs fuel. Beyond Earth's magnetic field, energetic particles from the Sun and from distant events in our galaxy can pass through tissue, damage cells, and sometimes alter DNA. You wouldn't see a population changing when that happens. At first, you'd see medical records. Shielding can lower the exposure, though it can't make the problem vanish. Water, food, fuel, and even waste could be stored around living areas so that material the ship already carries does a second job. Crews might retreat into a more heavily protected room during a solar storm. Yet, cosmic rays with very high energies are harder to stop, and some shielding can produce new particles when struck. Building thicker walls is not a complete answer. Over one voyage, doctors would worry about cancer, damaged organs, fertility, pregnancy, and the development of children. Over many generations, the same exposures could also create biological pressure. Mutations happen without a destination. Most are neutral or harmful, while a few may affect how well someone survives or has children under those conditions. If those effects are inherited, their frequency could shift over time. That is natural selection, but it doesn't give us a schedule or a forecast. A small population adds another source of change, because chance alone can make some gene variants more common and others disappear. Medical screening, embryo selection, limits on who has children, or attempts to preserve genetic diversity would alter that process again. Those choices would be social and political as much as biological, and they could shape the population more quickly than radiation ever does. Habitat design would matter too. A crew living behind strong shielding would face different pressure from one accepting greater exposure to save mass. Better cancer treatment could allow people with certain risks to live and reproduce, while a strict reproductive policy might push the gene pool in another direction. None of this means ship-borne humans would become radiation-proof, and we have no evidence that a predictable new type of person would appear. The first differences might remain almost invisible across the entire voyage. A changed rate in one illness, a fertility pattern, or a gene variant becoming common after several unlucky births. By the time anyone called it adaptation, medicine and policy might have done as much shaping as the environment. So if the ship's population begins changing before anyone looks different, who decides which changes should be treated, prevented or passed on? It would be tempting to give those changes a dramatic name. After enough generations aboard the ship, people might look back at Earth and say they had become a new species, but a population can move away from its starting point without crossing that line, and biology offers no meter that clicks from human to something else. Species boundaries are especially difficult when every person lives inside one closed community. On Earth, scientists often ask whether two populations can still have children together, but the ship may have no outside population available for that test. Genetic differences could build for centuries while everyone aboard remained fully able to have children with people from Earth. Distance alone wouldn't settle it. The forces changing them would also pull in several directions at once. Natural selection might favor traits that help people stay healthy in the ship's conditions, yet selection doesn't plan ahead. It only changes the odds that some traits become more common after their carriers leave more children. Radiation could add mutations, but most would be harmful or have little effect. A few might become common by chance, especially in a small population. None would arrive with labels explaining what they were for. Then human choices enter the same gene pool. Doctors may prevent a disease that once reduced survival. Parents may use embryo screening to avoid a dangerous variant. Ship leaders might limit close relatives from having children together, or decide that certain medical risks are too costly for a closed habitat. Even the design of the habitat could change which bodies coped best. Adjust the light, diet, air pressure, work cycle, or radiation shielding, and you alter the conditions acting on everyone inside. That makes future change real, but it doesn't make it predictable. A small founding population can drift genetically because of chance. A larger one may preserve more variation. One accident, one epidemic, or one policy kept for 5 generations could leave a stronger mark than centuries of gentle selection. Run the same voyage twice with the same ship, and you may not get the same population at the end. So we shouldn't invent pale, long-limbed descendants and call the science finished. The defensible claim is simpler. Bodies, genes, medicine, policy, and the habitat would keep shaping one another while the result remained open. They might still be human in every biological sense we can test, even after Earth felt culturally remote. But if biology gives no clean moment of separation, what would make the people aboard decide that they were no longer Earth's population at all? A doctor on the ship might begin with a small but serious problem. The reference chart could be wrong. A blood pressure reading that looks unusual by Earth standards might be healthy for someone whose family has lived aboard for generations. The same could be true of bone density or hormone levels. Even pregnancy might follow a slightly different pattern. Medicine works through comparison. We call a test result high or low because it falls outside a range measured in other people. But those ranges already change with age and ancestry. Diet, sex, and altitude can shift them too. A generation ship would place several new pressures on one group for a very long time. As the years passed, records from the ship might tell its doctors more than charts sent from Earth. A difference would not become healthy just because it was common. Doctors would still watch for pain or lost function. They would ask whether people were dying younger, whether pregnancies were failing, or whether infection and injury had become harder to survive. Telling a new baseline from a disease might take years of records, with careful checks across many families. Radiation would make that task harder. Shielding could lower the dose, though it might never match the exposure most people receive on Earth. Radiation can damage DNA and raise the risk of cancer. If it harms eggs or sperm, the effects may reach future children as well. Astronauts and laboratory studies give us part of the answer. So do records from people exposed to radiation on Earth. None of them gives us a clean model of one population living inside a moving habitat for hundreds of years. Reproduction could then become both a medical concern and a political choice. The crew might screen embryos for severe inherited disease. During a period of higher radiation, they might delay conception. Births might also be timed around food or the number of trained caregivers available. Such choices could change which genes reach the next generation. A rule about who may have children could do the same, even if it began during a short crisis. The ship itself would shape the result. Better shielding could prevent some harm before a doctor ever saw it. Steady light, clean air, exercise space, and enough room to move could also reduce the pressure that favors certain traits. Engineering would become preventive medicine, changing which bodies stayed healthiest without changing a gene on purpose. We have no sound basis for claiming these pressures would create one fixed kind of descendant. Selection changes the odds. Chance can change them again, as can medical care, new policies, or people moving between ship communities. Some differences might spread, while others could disappear within a few generations. The awkward part is that medicine would help decide what counted as normal, and those decisions could shape the population being protected. If the ship's baseline kept drifting, who would decide whether a difference was an illness, an adaptation worth keeping, or simply another healthy way for a human body to be? A sealed habitat can look simple on a diagram. People breathe, plants replace the oxygen, waste feeds the soil, and water returns after use. Biosphere 2 showed how quickly that tidy circle can turn into a web, where changing one strand pulls on several others at once. In September of 1991, 8 people entered the glass enclosure in Arizona for a planned 2-year stay. The building held a farm and several constructed ecosystems, all meant to recycle air, water, and nutrients with little help from outside. Yet the residents soon found that the system did not behave like a larger version of a greenhouse. Closing the doors had joined processes that its designers could study separately, but the residents had to live with all at once. Oxygen began to fall. It started near 21%, close to the air outside, then dropped to about 14% within 16 months. That's similar to breathing at high altitude. Some crew members became tired, and the decline was serious enough that oxygen had to be added from outside. There wasn't one broken machine to blame. Microbes in the rich soil were using oxygen as they consumed organic material. The carbon dioxide they released should have made the cause easy to spot, but much of that gas was reacting with exposed concrete and being stored there. One process hid the evidence of another. The air, soil, microbes, crops, and building materials had become parts of the same problem. Food production brought its own surprises. Cloudy weather reduced sunlight, crops yielded less than planned, and the residents lost weight while spending much of each day growing and preparing food. Some animal populations declined. Ants and cockroaches did very well. A habitat designed around human needs had made room for winners its builders had not chosen, which is a mildly insulting result from creatures that never attended a planning meeting. That is what hidden coupling does. Your breakfast depends on yesterday's light. The oxygen level depends partly on soil chemistry, and a wall can alter the gases available to your lungs. Daily routines stop being separate choices because each one changes the conditions for everything else. Inside a closed system, those links become part of daily life, whether anyone approves of them or not. On a generation ship, these links would settle into rules with the force of weather. Farming schedules, repair work, meal sizes, and even permission to have children could be shaped by measurements elsewhere in the system. No ruler would need to invent every restriction. The habitat itself would keep producing them. So, when a closed world forces choices about food, air, labor, and population, who gets to decide how those pressures are shared? The first answer might be the people who understand each system best. Let the farm crew set crop limits, the medical team advise on births, and the engineers decide when power must be cut. And that sounds sensible until one adjustment crosses 3 departments at once. Suppose the algae tanks need more light to restore the ship's oxygen balance. More light means more electricity, which may leave less power for the workshops. Slower workshops delay a pump repair, and that delay changes how much water the farms can use. No one has made a reckless choice. Each team has protected the system in front of them, yet together they have created a shortage somewhere else. This is a hidden coupling. 2 parts of life turn out to be linked through machinery, biology, or limited supplies. You can see a mild version at home when running the washing machine lowers the water pressure in the shower. On a ship, the links would reach much further. A medical choice could affect food demand decades later. A crop decision could change waste processing next month. Privacy itself might shrink because the crew cannot manage those connections without measurements from bodies, rooms, and family plans. Once that happens, technical advice begins to carry the weight of authority. An oxygen reading may appear to settle an argument about work hours. A population model may shape who can become a parent. Yet instruments only report conditions. They cannot decide what counts as a fair burden, whose comfort should be reduced first, or whether the people making a sacrifice deserve more influence later. The ship would need rules for those judgments, and the rules would probably feel less like commands than habits built into each day. Water allowances might change with reservoir levels, meals could follow harvest forecasts, certain repairs might outrank sleep, celebration, or time with family. Children would grow up learning these limits as basic manners, because wasting heat or hiding an illness would place costs on people they know. That creates a form of government even if nobody uses the word. Someone chooses which measurements count, how much uncertainty is acceptable, who may see the data, and how appeals are heard. A council may vote, experts may hold emergency powers, or software may recommend limits, but none of those arrangements removes judgment, they only place it somewhere. And because every loop touches another loop, authority would spread into parts of life that people on Earth can often keep personal. The difficult choice is no longer whether the ship needs rules. It does. The next choice is whether those rules can protect a shared habitat without turning every private decision into public business. So where could a generation ship draw that line? A child raised aboard the ship would learn ecology before knowing the word for it. Leave a tap running, waste food, or put the wrong material into a recycler, and the result wouldn't vanish into some distant system. A warning might appear by dinner. The air unit could need more power. A greenhouse could receive less water tomorrow. On Earth, many of these connections are hidden by distance. Your rubbish leaves in a truck, water comes through a pipe, food appears in a shop, often from somewhere you'll never visit. The links still exist, but most people can go through a day without seeing them. A ship wouldn't allow that distance. Its air, water, food, waste, heat and power systems would form closed loops, and a change in one could move through several others. Give the crops more light, and you use more electricity and create more heat. Grow more food, and you may need more water, more fertilizer, and more work from the recycling system. Nothing happens alone. Engineers call these hidden couplings, links between systems that may not be obvious until one part changes. For the people living there, those couplings would feel less like engineering and more like gravity. You could dislike them, complain about them, even vote on how to respond, but you couldn't repeal the physical link between a damaged filter and poorer air. That pressure would shape education. Children might learn to trace the cost of an action through the ship before they were trusted to make certain choices. Not because every child had to become an engineer, but because carelessness would be difficult to contain. A lesson about wasting soup could also be a lesson about water recovery, crop time, and the hours someone spent repairing a pump. After enough generations, restraint might carry moral weight. Using more than your share wouldn't seem merely rude. It could feel reckless, because everyone would understand which machines and living systems had absorbed the cost. Keeping the habitat stable might become part of what it meant to be a decent person. Then those descendants reach Earth and meet people trained by a very different setting. They see lights burning in empty rooms, food thrown away, clean water used once and sent down a drain. They see products built to be replaced, while the waste is moved beyond sight. Earth people may know the damage in broad terms, yet daily life lets them ignore each link. To someone from the ship, that could look like a moral failure. But Earth's systems are larger, more open, and harder to trace, so the same action doesn't always carry the same immediate cost. Before judging either culture, the descendants would have to decide whether responsibility comes from what people intend, what they can see, or what their way of life has trained them not to notice. Mars 500 put 6 men inside a sealed mock spacecraft in Moscow for 520 days. They never left Earth, and help was only a few rooms away. But the crew had to live as if distance separated them from mission control. Messages were delayed to copy the growing gap between Earth and a ship bound for Mars. At first, a delay sounds like a mild nuisance, like waiting for someone to answer a text. But even a few minutes changes the kind of answer you can receive. If a machine starts making the wrong sound, you can't talk through the problem in real time. You describe it, send the message, wait, receive a reply, and then discover that the situation has already moved on. During Mars 500, the simulated delay eventually reached about 25 minutes each way. That meant a simple exchange could take close to an hour, even if everyone answered at once. Mission Control could still advise the crew, but it could no longer take part in each decision as it happened. The people inside had to interpret rules, weigh risks, and act before any reply could reach them. That difference can seem small from the outside. The authority on Earth still writes the procedures and watches the reports. Yet, authority that arrives after the decision is partly a record of what has already occurred. The crew isn't openly rejecting command. Communication physics has placed them in a position where following command requires judgment, because no instruction can cover the exact state of a machine, a conflict, or an illness half an hour later. Mars 500 lasted less than a year and a half, with the door always close enough to open in a true emergency. A generation ship would face delays measured first in hours, then years, and eventually decades. By then, a message from Earth would come from people who had never met the crew receiving it. Its answer might reach their children. So distance doesn't merely make administration slower. It changes who can administer daily life at all. Earth may remain the source of a mission's founding plans, but the ship's living population would have to turn those plans into decisions under conditions Earth could no longer inspect in time. Custom would grow around those decisions, offices would form, disputes would be settled before distant authorities even heard that they existed. The ship would not need to declare independence for power to move aboard. Delay would do much of that work on its own, one unanswered emergency and one late instruction at a time. And once the people making the rules have never seen Earth, what would still make Earth's authority binding? A message from Earth could still carry legal weight, but it could not govern the way a nearby authority does. If a reply takes years, the people aboard must act before it arrives, then live with the result long before anyone on Earth can approve it. That turns delay into more than an inconvenience. It becomes a condition built into the ship's constitution, whether that constitution is written down or not. The speed of light sets the limit. No better antenna, stronger computer, or more devoted crew can make a distant answer arrive in time for tonight's fire, tomorrow's crop failure, or a dispute that has already stopped work. You can see the problem in a much smaller setting. A remote research station may receive rules from a national agency, yet the person on site decides what happens when the generator fails during a storm. The agency's authority remains real, but immediate power sits with whoever can assess the danger and act. On a starship, that temporary arrangement would last for generations. Earth could send broad instructions, protect the life support system, preserve the mission, distribute scarce supplies fairly. But each rule would need interpretation. Does preserving the mission mean restricting risky medical treatment? Can a council order someone into hazardous repair work? Who decides whether one family may use more water because a child is ill? These aren't slogans about freedom. They're administrative choices with bodies, food, air, and time attached. A ruling from Earth might arrive after the patient had recovered, the repair crew had died, or the disputed water had passed through the recycling system hundreds of times. Even if the ruling were accepted, it would function less like an order and more like a judgment from history. The ship would study it, argue over it, and decide how much should apply to conditions its authors had never experienced. That gap would also change consent. People born aboard never agreed to the launch contract. They inherited its machines and limits, but inheritance alone does not settle who may command them. Earth might claim ownership of the vessel, while its residents claim that maintaining the vessel gives them political standing. Both claims could sound reasonable, and neither could be enforced quickly from across interstellar space. So delay would shape government before anyone chose a flag or wrote a declaration. The ship would need rules that could survive without timely permission, and Earth would have to decide whether distant authority means control, guidance, or little more than memory. But if the first generation accepted Earth's command, could that acceptance bind people born centuries later? By the time the ship returns, its first message may sound less like a request to come home and more like an announcement of arrival. The people speaking will know Earth through records, delayed conversations and stories passed down by families who never expected the voyage to last so long. They may share Earth's languages and history, but they won't be a crew reporting to a control room. They'll be a society introducing itself. Communication delay will have helped make that society. Even near the end of the voyage, a message may take years to reach Earth, with the reply taking years more. You can't run courts, schools, food systems, or elections by waiting for an answer that belongs to an earlier crisis. Decisions made aboard will take effect long before anyone on Earth can object. Over generations, that gap stops being an inconvenience and becomes part of the ship's constitution, whether anyone uses that word or not. This doesn't mean the residents must stage a dramatic break with Earth. Their independence could develop through paperwork, maintenance schedules, family law, and thousands of decisions that simply can't be postponed. A council settles a dispute because no outside judge can hear it in time. Engineers ration a failing resource because Earth's advice will arrive after the danger has passed. Children grow up under those decisions, then inherit the offices that made them. Authority becomes local because consequences are local. No single meeting would create this arrangement. It would build slowly, as each late reply confirmed that the people facing a problem had already carried the risk, chosen a remedy, and lived with the result. Earth may still send commands, legal claims, or offers of support. Yet each message will describe what Earth wanted years earlier, while the ship answers from conditions Earth hasn't heard about yet. Even friendly communication will be out of step. It would be like governing a town through letters delivered after every mayor has left office, except the town carries its own heir and cannot afford a delayed mistake. So the returning ship presents a difficult fact before anyone debates flags or recognition. It has already been governing itself for centuries. Its residents have lived under rules made aboard, relied on institutions built aboard, and accepted duties to people whose lives depend on the same machines. Sovereignty, in that setting, isn't mainly a claim. It is the accumulated result of having to decide, act, and bear the cost without timely outside control. When its signal finally reaches Earth, the voice may still sound familiar. The terms it offers may not. Earth will have to answer a civilization that arrived politically before it arrived physically, and if both societies call the same planet home, who decides what returning home now means? A family can carry a house key long after the house itself is gone. The key may open nothing now, yet it still belongs beside the names, recipes, and stories that tell the family where it began. Something similar could happen aboard a returning ship, except the place remembered would be an entire planet. No one alive on the ship may have walked through rain, touched soil, or heard birds outside a recording. Their Earth would come through saved voices, school lessons, old films, family rituals, and objects carried across generations. A child might know the shape of a coastline before knowing every passage in the ship. Earth would be part of daily life without being part of lived experience. Human communities already know this divided feeling. Descendants of people who left a homeland can remain deeply attached to it even when they speak differently, follow changed customs, or feel awkward once they arrive. Recognition and distance can exist together. One doesn't cancel the other. That helps us understand why the ship's descendants might call Earth sacred without pretending it is familiar. They could protect an old song while missing the joke inside it. They might prepare a meal from an inherited recipe using substitutes grown aboard, then discover that the Earth version tastes wrong to them. The copy has become the comfort. The source has become strange. Earth, meanwhile, may expect gratitude, loyalty, or some sign that the returning people still belong to the culture that sent their ancestors away. But memory doesn't preserve a society like a sealed container. Each generation chooses what to keep, changes what no longer fits, and passes along a version shaped by life on the ship. After centuries, the descendants may love an Earth that no longer exists, while people on Earth may look at them and see familiar faces carrying unfamiliar habits. None of this makes their attachment false. A place can matter because it holds your beginning, not because it governs your present. They may visit a launch site, as others visit an ancestral village, moved by the ground beneath them, aware that their own life was formed somewhere else. That mixture may be uncomfortable, but it is coherent. Earth can be origin, inheritance, and sacred ground without becoming their political center or their easiest home. The harder problem begins when both sides treat that bond as a claim. If the descendants owe respect to their place of origin, what, if anything, does Earth owe to the people who carried its memory farther than anyone else? Being born from a place is different from being formed by daily life there. A family can carry recipes, songs, names, and stories across an ocean, while the children grow up knowing another street, another climate, and another way of moving through the day. For the descendants aboard the ship, that distance would stretch across generations. Earth might fill their oldest records. They could know its coastlines, its animals, and the small rooms where the voyage was planned. Some families might preserve soil in sealed containers, or repeat the names of towns that vanished long before anyone alive was born. Those things would be real parts of their inheritance. A child might learn every bend of a distant river from family stories, and still have no idea how its mud feels. But inheritance is not the same as experience. Their sense of home would come from waking to the ship's lights, hearing pumps behind the walls, and knowing which corridor carries the smell of warm bread at the start of a shift. They would remember childhood games adapted to low gravity, public arguments over water use, and the particular sound made when a worn ventilation fan needs attention. Earth gave their ancestors a beginning. The ship taught them how life works. Human migrations already show how recognition and estrangement can exist together. A person can reach the country their grandparents left, understand a phrase without speaking it well, and feel affection for a place that still makes them check every street sign. There is no contradiction in that. Memory can cross a distance that habit cannot. The ship-borne population would have an even wider gap to cross. They might recognize an oak tree from thousands of images, then find its size unsettling in person. Rain could be a beloved feature of old stories, and at the same time, an alarming amount of uncontrolled water falling from an open sky. Even gravity would turn a remembered world into a physical demand. Their bodies might tire quickly. Stairs could feel badly designed. A planet celebrated for freedom might seem to pin them to the floor. Earth's people could misread that discomfort as rejection. The visitors might misread Earth's pride as a demand for gratitude. Both responses would miss the simpler human fact. You can care deeply about where your people began and still feel out of place there. That leaves a practical difficulty. If these descendants return carrying Earth's languages and history, yet need different buildings, customs, and perhaps legal protections just to live safely, will Earth receive them as returning family, foreign visitors, or a new people with claims of their own? Recognition would begin in small places. A visitor might hear a childhood song in a railway station after a long day, understand every word, and know why an older person nearby is humming along. Then the train doors would open, everyone would move at a pace their body couldn't match, and the shared song would offer no help at all. That split wouldn't make their connection to Earth false. Families separated by migration already live with a milder version of it. A grandmother's recipe can taste like home, even when the town where she learned it feels unfamiliar. You may know the jokes, the prayers, and the names of distant streets without knowing which bus to catch or how people behave at the dinner table. Memory can preserve a place, but it preserves the place someone left. Life there keeps changing. For the returning descendants, the gap could cover centuries. Their records might describe nations that no longer exist, coastlines altered by rising water, and cities rebuilt so many times that familiar names point to unfamiliar ground. The people of Earth would have changed as well. Languages shift. Customs lose their old meanings. A gesture preserved carefully aboard the ship might look formal, dated, or even rude to the people who inherited it here. Yet, recognition would keep arriving. They might see the same moon their ancestors watched through the departure windows. They could open an archive and match a family voice to a person buried on Earth. A patch of soil, a surviving building, or the smell of rain might connect a stored account to something present and physical. None of that would require them to pretend they had always belonged here. This is how a diaspora can carry two feelings without choosing between them. The place of origin can remain part of your identity, while daily belonging grows somewhere else. The Descendants' food, humour, manners, and ideas about privacy would have formed inside the ship's limited rooms. Their home would be the place where people knew how to repair an air system, share scarce space, and read the faint sounds of machinery without thinking about it. Earth could be their beginning without being their centre. That distinction would be hard for both sides. People on Earth might offer symbols when the visitors need access, patience, and room to live differently. The visitors might treasure those symbols while refusing the role of lost children finally restored to the family. Recognition says, "I know where this came from." Belonging says, "I know how to live here." If Earth is their origin, the ship is their home, and neither claim cancels the other, where would they decide their future should be? The first meeting at an Earth port would look familiar for about 5 minutes. A health team asks about microbes, while customs officers inspect whatever comes ashore, and then someone requests a passport, at which point the familiar process stops working. These travelers wouldn't be tourists from another country. They might belong to a community that had governed itself for generations. Its people followed laws made by leaders they chose. Yet no government on Earth had accepted that community as a state. Present law offers no simple way to decide whether the ship was their home, their land, or somehow both. Health officials would have good reason to move slowly. Earth microbes might harm people whose bodies had adapted to a closed habitat. Organisms from the ship could also behave in ways nobody had tested. Quarantine might therefore make medical sense. It can still feel like detention when the order comes from a government the visitors never accepted. Customs would meet the same problem from another direction. Its power normally begins at a border between recognized territories, so officials would first need to decide what kind of place the ship was. If they called it territory, its people might enter Earth under their own authority. If they called it property, Earth might regard a vessel full of families as ownerless. The paperwork would become slightly absurd, because the missing box would also describe the largest fact in the room. No form could settle the dispute before anyone agreed on what had arrived. Earth governments might welcome the visitors as human relatives. At the same time, they may refuse to treat the visitors' council as a government. The language of family would pull toward reunion. "You came from us, so you belong with us." The visitors could answer that Earth had never ruled them or protected them, and had never lived under the laws that kept them alive. Both claims could be sincere. A warm greeting might carry real affection. It can also place the visitors beneath Earth's rule. Their demand for freedom might sound cold to people who saw the arrival as the end of a long human separation. These decisions couldn't wait politely for one another. A medical order could become a border dispute. A customs ruling might imply ownership before anyone discussed formal status. Talk of kinship can soften the meeting without deciding who holds power. Health, borders, government, and family all pull the same conversation in different directions. Before this returning human branch chose where to build its future, who would have the right to speak for it? The first people to meet the arrivals might wear protective suits rather than diplomatic uniforms. Before citizenship or family could be discussed, a biosafety team would need time to study medical histories and samples. People raised away from Earth could carry microbes they tolerate, but Earth does not. Earth's microbes might be just as dangerous to them. Health officials could limit movement while studying both risks without intending any political judgment. The order shapes the political meeting anyway. If thousands remained aboard, they would be under the physical control of the state managing the landing site. Officials might call it quarantine, while the arrivals experienced it as confinement, even if they accepted the medical reason. Customs authority would enter almost at once because a vessel had crossed international territory. Officers would need to know who controlled it and what was coming ashore. Yet the ship might be less like an aircraft carrying passengers than a moving settlement. Its residents could reject the idea that landing placed them under a government they had never chosen. Their political standing would still be unsettled. If they claimed to represent an independent society, Earth's governments would have to decide how to receive their delegates, and they might disagree. One government could welcome foreign officials, while another treats the same people as private citizens or refugees, even though both are responding to the same arriving community. Even a formal ceremony might appear to recognize independence before other governments had agreed. Then family language would pull in a different direction. People on Earth might call the arrivals cousins returning after a long separation. They may mean it with real affection. You can understand why that welcome would feel natural. Still, calling someone family can carry an unspoken claim about where they belong. The arrivals might accept the shared history, while refusing the place Earth assigned them within it. None of these frames would cancel the others. A health officer could accept the visitor's freedom and still require quarantine. Customs officers can inspect the ship without deciding who rules it. A government might receive delegates as most residents waited aboard. Families might support precautions that felt severe to those living through them. That overlap makes controlled entry politically dangerous. A medical precaution could leave the newcomers in one state's custody. A border inspection could test whether they obey its rules. Warm family language can make resistance sound like rejection of a shared human past. Each official might defend one limited action. Together, those actions could create control that nobody had openly claimed. The argument begins when protection starts to look like control, and neither side agrees on who gets to decide. The first answer would probably be time, since no inspection or treaty meeting could settle everything at once. Both sides first have to learn what the arrivals carried and what they wanted. Officials would make decisions in stages, hoping to keep one urgent problem from deciding every other one. Health teams would begin with infection risk. They could study the ship's records before testing samples and watching for signs no one expected. Customs officers face a different task. A sealed container might hold food or a machine they didn't recognize. Keeping it closed says nothing about the visitor's future status. Even so, every test would place them under Earth's rules. Public status would move more slowly. One country might accept documents issued aboard the ship and receive a few delegates. That does not mean it accepts the shipboard society as a state. The limited welcome could still affect everyone else. If the meetings gave one government early access to new technology, others might object, because no government speaks for the whole planet. Kinship would pull in another direction. The arrivals might speak familiar languages and carry names found in old family records. They may call Earth their place of origin. People here might answer by calling them relatives or returning citizens. You can hear the warmth in that welcome, but it would draw the visitors into a bond they had never agreed to join. Being called family doesn't ensure equal treatment. Their first status might therefore remain incomplete on purpose. Medical review could continue under outside review. Chosen representatives might leave the landing area for talks. Citizenship decisions might wait until later, with sovereignty taking longer still. Any temporary ruling would need a way to challenge it and a date for review. Otherwise, an arrangement meant to last for weeks could continue for years, leaving the visitors on Earth but unable to settle elsewhere or depart by choice. More time could reduce fear as each side learned how the other behaved. Delay still carries power of its own. Whoever controlled the landing ground and transport would have more freedom than people waiting for permission. That imbalance grows if the same authority also controls food or access to laboratories. A phased process would help only if waiting didn't decide the outcome before talks began. Beneath every temporary decision, mutual recognition would remain unsettled. Earth would judge which rights the arrivals receive. The visitors would judge whether Earth had earned any rule over them. Medical caution couldn't settle a customs claim, and customs couldn't decide sovereignty. Family language might soften the welcome while making refusal harder. How could two branches of humanity recognize each other as equals when every earthly system assigned the newcomers a different role? Equality might first feel real over breakfast. The visitors could understand the legal terms and accept the safety rules, then find themselves stopped by a bowl of fruit. Its colors might seem familiar, while its smell and texture would not. Even sharing a meal could call for medical advice and careful testing, with one group eating as the other waited to learn what its body could safely handle. Later, someone would stand in line for a health check or permission to leave the landing site. On Earth, waiting in a queue feels dull and mildly irritating. To people raised inside a vessel, the loose way that line forms might be more striking than the delay. Strangers would shift and make room without assigned stations or a shipboard system directing them. The visitors might know what the line was for and still have to learn how it worked. A casual chat could expose another kind of distance. Earth's languages would have changed, while the visitors might carry old sounds beside newer words made for closed habitats and machines found nowhere here. Translation could give both sides the basic meaning and still miss the social signal beneath it. A pause that seemed respectful to one speaker might seem evasive to another. A laugh could ease the strain or leave everyone unsure about who had misunderstood whom. The strongest shock might come when nothing was happening. A visitor could step outside, look up, and see a sky with no ceiling. Someone born aboard a ship would already know why the atmosphere looks blue. They could explain how sunlight scatters through air, but knowing the physics wouldn't make the open space feel smaller. A cloud could pass high above. Later, a bird might cross the same space with no visible support. The horizon would lie farther away than any wall the visitors had known, and the land would seem to continue beyond it. That much depth might feel beautiful to some and unsafe to others. People on Earth eat beneath that sky and wait beneath it without giving it much thought. We argue, chat, and check the weather before going out, rarely treating the distance overhead as a privilege. The visitors might notice that people here spend whole lives under more open space than any ship could hold, yet often forget to look up. None of this would prove that either culture was freer, wiser, or more human. It would show how a habitat shapes expectations of privacy, movement, and safety. If blue sky meant home to one side and exposure to the other, shared laws could take them only so far. How would they learn what the other side felt when neither had ever needed to explain it? The first shared meal might reveal more than the first treaty. A human takes a full plate, eats half, and leaves the rest because the bread has gone dry or the fruit is bruised. Nearby, a visitor watches food enter a waste bin and tries to understand why anyone would discard something safe to eat. No insult was intended. To the human, it was a forgettable lunch. To someone raised where every gram had to be grown inside a sealed habitat, it could look like a small act of destruction. Earth's abundance would appear in habits we barely notice. Water runs while someone washes a cup. Lights stay on in an empty hall. A shop removes edible food when a fresher delivery arrives because customers expect full shelves. Each choice has a local reason, and none makes humans cruel. Together, they reveal an expectation that more will be available tomorrow. The misunderstanding would travel both ways. Visitors might measure each serving and save every scrap. They might ask who approved an extra drink, which could seem controlling to their hosts. A dinner queue could stall while portions are checked against the number of people expected later. You might read that delay as distrust. The visitors may see it as care for everyone who hasn't eaten yet. The same behavior can feel generous from inside one history and cold from inside another. Even conversation could expose the gap. A human might chat through a meal and let hot food cool untouched. A visitor might eat with full attention because meals once carried the weight of survival. Perhaps eating slowly feels friendly to us, proof that nobody is counting the minutes or guarding the bowl. To them, leaving food untouched while talking might seem careless, even when the talk itself is warm. Then someone notices rain coming and drops a paper cup into a bin without thinking. The visitor may look up too, still uneasy beneath all that open air, and then back at the cup. It is a useful object made to last only minutes. Nothing dramatic has happened, which is why the moment says so much. Treaties describe respect in careful terms, but lunch shows what each side believes can be replaced. Living together would mean learning that waste is not always contempt and restraint is not always fear. A pause before taking more may carry a whole habitat's memory. Neither side would need to pretend the difference had vanished. They would need to notice it before a meal became an accusation. Once they understood what each side saved, spent, and threw away, who would get to decide when there was enough? The next misunderstanding might happen while everyone is waiting for a door to open. The humans form a line, leaving a little space between bodies, while the visitors gather according to some rule no human can see. Both groups are being polite. Each is also making the other slightly nervous. A line tells you who may move, how long a delay should be tolerated, and whether a place belongs to one person or the group. Humans may ask who arrived first, then defend the answer with surprising force. The visitors may care less about arrival than age or task. Perhaps they follow a shared rhythm learned before they had words. Nobody has announced a principle. They have only tried to enter a room. Conversation exposes another gap. Human small talk often fills time without carrying much information. We mention the weather or ask how someone slept, though tone and timing do much of the work. A visitor who treats every statement as a request for facts could answer with a full weather record. Asked about sleep, they might give a medical account, then offer a plan to shorten the queue. Helpful perhaps, also exhausting. Their casual speech may confuse us in return. What sounds like a private thought could be meant for everyone nearby. A reply might come through color or posture instead of sound. Humans might keep lowering their voices, assuming privacy comes from being harder to hear, while the visitors wonder why a public exchange has become faint and incomplete. Jokes would test the relationship even more sharply. A joke can depend on saying something false, while trusting the listener to notice that you don't mean it. That works only when both sides recognize the same social signals. A visitor might hear an insult where a human offered affection. A human might miss a playful response because it arrived 10 seconds later, after the moment seemed to have passed. Explaining the joke would repair the facts, but not always the feeling. Even looking up could carry weight. To us, it may mean curiosity, distraction, or nothing at all. To a species raised beneath a low ceiling, a dense canopy, or a permanent cloud layer, exposing the throat and turning attention away from the group might signal trust. It might signal danger instead. We wouldn't know until enough small moments had gathered around the gesture. And that is where distance becomes easiest to feel. Formal talks let both sides prepare their meanings. Daily life does not. Assumptions slip out in a pause, a glance, or the choice of who moves first when a passage narrows. If friendship can survive law and containment, can it also survive the 1,000 tiny acts nobody realizes need translating? For people on Earth, the hardest part of a return may begin after the first welcome is over. The visitors wouldn't bring back only samples, records, or unfamiliar machines. They would arrive carrying a different account of what a human life can mean, and the fact that they were standing there would make that account difficult to dismiss. Before their arrival, Earth could still treat itself as the center of the human story. Even distant settlements might be described as branches growing from the same trunk, dependent on Earth for their language, history, and sense of belonging. A returning population could reject that description. They may see Earth as an ancestral place rather than a present authority, much as someone can value the town where a grandparent was born without accepting its rules. That change would press on more than governments. Schools, religions, families, and political movements all tell stories about where people came from and what holds them together. Our community shaped elsewhere might carry memories that don't fit those stories. Its members may honor different sacrifices, mark different turning points, or regard survival away from Earth as the event that made them a people. Earth's version of history wouldn't become false, but it would no longer be the only human version spoken by living witnesses. You couldn't wave this away as theory. The evidence would have faces. It would speak in human voices, remember human ancestors, and still refuse the idea that Earth owns the final definition of humanity. That makes the challenge personal. A parent might feel pride in what their descendants achieved, then feel the sting of hearing that they no longer consider Earth home. Both reactions could exist at once, which is often how family news works when everyone loves one another and nobody agrees on what the family is. Politics would feel the strain as well. Leaders often draw authority from shared identity. One past, one public, one future. The returnees would show that the past had split and continued along another path. Earth might offer citizenship, protection, or representation, only to learn that these gestures sound less like welcome and more like a claim of ownership. Even a museum display could become awkward. Is it preserving a shared inheritance, or placing someone else's living culture safely behind glass? None of this requires hatred. The visitors might love Earth, study its art, and grieve at places their ancestors once knew. Yet affection wouldn't restore the old center. Their lives would prove that human meaning had grown beyond a single world, without waiting for Earth to approve the change. So after the ceremonies, the legal meetings, and the first careful reunions, who gets to say what all humans now share? For the travelers, Earth may have survived as more than a place. Over many generations, it could become the first home, the lost garden, or the source of every rule that still feels too important to challenge. A child might learn its blue oceans before learning the layout of the ship. Earth would be memory without witnesses, polished by distance until history and belief became hard to separate. Then the ship arrives, and people can walk outside. The trouble is not that Earth must be worse than the stories. It will simply be real. The air may smell wrong, familiar cities may be gone, while customs dismissed in shipboard stories as ancient errors are still practiced by millions of people. Some forests have returned, others exist only in records. Earth's people may recognize the travelers as human relatives, while finding their accents, manners, and beliefs completely foreign. You can argue with an old document. It is harder to argue with rain falling on your face, or with a living city built across the ground your founding story called sacred. Evidence has arrived in a body. The returning descendants can touch it, breathe it, and hear Earth's people give their own account of what happened after the ship left. That could split the visitors without anyone losing their mind. Some may decide the old stories were never meant as literal history. Others may say Earth has fallen away from the values it once sent into space. A third group could trust the living planet over the ship's teachers, which would make every inherited law open to review. The disagreement would reach schools, councils, families, and religious life because it changes who has the right to explain the past. Earth would face a similar shock. Its records might describe the launch as a national project, a desperate mission, or a failed experiment. The people stepping from the ship would carry private letters, altered rituals, and family names that survived long after Earth stopped expecting a return. They would not fit comfortably inside a memorial plaque. No battle is required for this to hurt. A grandparent may hear a child call an Earth account more believable than the story that held their family together. A political leader may discover that correcting the myth also weakens the law built upon it, and someone raised to think of Earth as humanity's sacred beginning may feel betrayed by a planet that never agreed to play that part. Once both sides can place living evidence beside inherited memory, which parts of the old story are they willing to lose? They may not get to choose which parts go first. A story can survive old records, disputed signals, and a few scholars arguing over dates. It has a harder time surviving a person who remembers the event, carries its effects, and can answer back. That is what makes a return different from a message. A message can be delayed, translated badly, dismissed as a trick, or locked away by the people who receive it. A returning crew is evidence with faces. They eat, age, disagree, recognize names, and produce objects whose wear records years of use. Even if some claims remain uncertain, their presence makes complete denial much harder. Success, then, may not look like a calm reunion. It may mean getting through the period when trusted stories no longer fit what people can see. Schools would have to revise lessons while parents were still explaining the old version at home. Courts might face claims from people whose legal identity had no place in current law. Religious leaders, historians, and public officials could all accept the same evidence while drawing very different meanings from it. You can feel how personal that would become. Learning that a childhood story is inaccurate rarely feels like changing one line in a textbook. It can feel as if someone has reached into your family and moved the walls. The returned travelers would feel that pressure too, because Earth's account might reduce their whole society to an accident, a lost expedition, or a footnote that happened to come back. None of this means either side must abandon everything it believes. Myths often contain more than factual claims. They hold duties, loyalties, and ways of explaining why a community stayed together. New evidence may break one claim while leaving those bonds in place. The difficult work is separating the part that can be corrected from the part people still need to live with one another. That process would be political because someone must decide which records become official. It would be emotional because correction carries grief. And it would be intellectual because two histories, each preserved under severe limits, might contain pieces the other lost. Survival could depend less on proving one side right than on building enough trust for both sides to change without treating change as surrender. A workable reunion would need time, repeated contact, and room for people to revise public claims without being asked to renounce their private past. So the first achievement may simply be this: the visitors remain present, the evidence remains available, and neither society forces a quick answer before people can absorb what has happened. But who gets to guide that slow revision when every guide was raised inside one of the stories now being revised? A successful return would not mean waking one morning with every medical reading inside an Earth reference range. After generations of adaptation, the visitors may carry bodies that cannot simply be reset, and forcing that reset could do more harm than leaving some differences alone. The first medical goal would be smaller and kinder. Keep people safe while learning which changes cause illness and which may now be necessary for life. That could still count as success in several ways at once. A visitor might regain enough strength to move through an Earth habitat without help, while still needing different air or medicine. Someone else might remain physically restricted, yet learn to manage symptoms and take part in public life. Neither person has failed, because a laboratory result still marks them as different. Medicine already works this way, though the stakes here would be far greater. A replacement joint does not turn a knee back into the one a person was born with, and insulin does not erase diabetes. Good care gives someone a safer, fuller life, without pretending treatment has restored an earlier body. For the returning population, that principle would have to stretch across systems no Earth doctor had treated before. Progress follows no single schedule. Breathing might improve long before balance, while pain could ease even as digestion remained difficult. A treatment that helps during sleep could make movement harder the next day, so each gain would have to be tested against the rest of a living body. The harder part would be deciding what to change. A feature that looks dangerous under Earth conditions may protect the visitor inside a ship habitat. Removing it could solve one problem while creating another. Doctors would need long observation, consent that can be withdrawn, and the freedom to say, "We don't know yet." The visitors would need authority over the definition of harm, since something that troubles an Earth-trained doctor may not feel like suffering to the person living in that body. Biomedical success might look modest from the outside. Medical crises could become less frequent as people gained more freedom to choose where and how they lived. Care can respond when something goes wrong without treating every inherited difference as damage. Full physical reintegration may never happen, yet health and independence could improve alongside a shared public life. That leaves a difficult choice beneath every treatment plan. When Earth medicine offers to change an adapted body, who decides whether it is healing an illness or removing part of a person? A successful return wouldn't require everyone to carry the same passport or live under the same law. It could begin with a smaller agreement built to last. Earth could recognize the visitors as a people with political standing, while they accepted Earth's institutions as partners they could work with. That may feel less satisfying than a grand reunion. Yet diplomacy often moves forward when one impossible deal gives way to limited agreements. A visitor might become a legal resident of an Earth nation while keeping citizenship in a settlement beyond Earth. At a landing site, the community could follow local safety rules, while its own law continued to govern life within the group. The two sides could settle each kind of contact as it became possible. Scientists might share medical findings under rules that kept private records protected. Trade might begin even while ownership of distant settlements remained unresolved. The distance between the populations would still be real, but people could live across it with less fear and confusion. We do have partial models for this. Countries accept foreign passports without claiming the nations that issued them. Some indigenous nations hold legal power inside a larger state, though history shows how often that power has been promised and later reduced. International crews also work where several legal systems overlap. None of these arrangements would fit a returning space community by itself, but the talks wouldn't have to begin from nothing. Progress would probably arrive at different speeds. Reliable travel rights might come first for families, with citizenship taking much longer. Doctors might gain permission to treat visitors while courts were still arguing over bodily choice. Children born after contact could attend Earth schools without losing their parents' language or political membership. The return succeeds in those areas without ending in full reunion. The harder task would be making those gains survive the next election or crisis. A welcome ceremony means little if a later government can cancel residency or seize a ship. Lasting recognition would need treaties that neither side could change alone. Courts also require real authority, backed by a process both communities accepted when disputes arose. The visitors would need seats at the table as equals. They couldn't be treated as a strange branch of humanity for Earth officials to sort and manage. A workable return might let people cross between communities and build lives together without forcing the visitors to surrender their political existence. Success would mean a durable working relationship, even if some questions stayed unsettled for generations. Once Earth and the visitors recognize each other as political communities, who speaks for humanity when a dispute reaches beyond Earth? A return can work even if nobody ends up where their ancestors began. Some visitors may settle on Earth, while others remain aboard their ships or move between both communities. None of those choices would make the meeting less real. A shared past could open more than one future. We already live with smaller versions of this. A person can feel tied to the country where their grandparents lived without pretending it is still the place they left, or that they belong there in quite the same way. They may keep old customs while still going home somewhere else. The connection survives because it is allowed to change. For people returning after generations in space, recognition may carry more weight than resemblance. Earth could accept that their history began here, while also accepting that centuries away produced a culture with its own memory and claims. The visitors could call Earth an ancestral home without treating it as their only home. That difference might spare everyone some awkward theatre with flags and arguments over who counts as properly human. Recognition could take physical forms too. A museum might place an object from the voyage beside something carried during early spaceflight. The two objects would join parts of the same history without claiming they tell the same story. Families might discover names or recordings that cross the centuries, while schools teach the departure and return as connected events, even when each community remembers them differently. Shared ceremonies might grow around that connection, though some people would avoid them. That is allowed too. The emotional result would vary from person to person. One visitor might step onto Earth and feel an immediate attachment. Someone else might find the gravity uncomfortable and the crowds exhausting, with a whole ancestral welcome aimed at a person they don't feel themselves to be. Both reactions could even arrive before lunch. No prescribed emotion defines psychological success. It would mean giving people enough safety and freedom to discover what the connection means to them. Over time, the strongest sign of success may be that the return stops being treated as a single event. Trade continues, and children grow up with friends in both places. Disagreements become specific instead of threatening the whole relationship. People borrow parts of daily life from one another, while keeping whatever does not transfer. Ancestry remains a link, but no longer a command. Earth would then be neither a lost paradise, nor a place the visitors had to reject in order to remain themselves. It could become one home among several, central to their history but felt differently by each person. The reunion does not erase the distance. It would give that distance a livable shape. And if human identity can stretch across separate worlds without requiring them to become identical again, how far could that recognition reach when the people we meet are no longer our descendants at all? A return to Earth sounds simple only while it remains an arrow on a map. A ship leaves, crosses the dark, turns around and comes back. But the people who arrive are not the people who departed, and the Earth waiting for them is not the one preserved in their oldest records. That doesn't make the journey a failure. It changes what success means. The travellers may carry languages learned from voices long dead, customs shaped by rooms that never opened to weather, and bodies adapted to a life their hosts have never lived. Earth may know them first as a signal, then as a file of medical readings, and only later as people walking through a sealed door. No shared ancestor can make that meeting simple. For those aboard the ship, Earth has been part memory, part lesson, and part claim. They may know its rivers from maps and its animals from recordings. They may have celebrated seasons that no wall around them could feel. Yet those borrowed details can still shape a real homeland, because home is not measured only by time spent on the ground. It can also live in duties carried forward by people who expect no reward for keeping them. And Earth has changed as well. Its residents may see the returning ship as human history arriving in physical form, but history can ask for things: food, space, medical protection, a place in law, a voice in decisions made by people who never agreed that the travellers would come back. So return cannot mean reversing the voyage. No engine can do that. The years remain spent, the dead remain dead, and both societies must meet without pretending that separation left either one untouched. Return means arriving close enough for consequences to become personal. A message can describe hunger without making room at a table. A record can preserve a name without giving its owner legal standing. From far away, each society can admire the other as an idea. Face to face, admiration has to survive inconvenience. That may be the last test of the mission. Not whether the ship reaches the right coordinates, but whether human beings can accept a connection that time has made difficult. The travellers would have to release the Earth they inherited in stories. The people on Earth would have to decide whether descent still carries any duty after so many generations apart. There may be no clean answer. Some arrivals might remain behind glass for years. Some families might choose the ship again, finding its narrow passages more familiar than wind or rain. Others may step onto the ground and feel nothing they were told to expect. A homeland can be real without feeling familiar, and familiar without being the place where you began. Perhaps that is why the return still has meaning. It brings a claim out of storage and places it among living people where it can be accepted, changed, or refused. It makes both sides answer through action. Long after the launch, Earth would no longer be a destination waiting unchanged. It would be a place with its own lives, fears, and limits. The ship would no longer be an expedition sent away. It would be a society arriving under its own history. Whether those histories could share a future would remain unsettled, but at last they would be near enough to try. And for tonight, that is where we can leave them, not restored to an earlier world, and not lost between the stars, but present before one another, carrying all the distance with them.